A couple years back, I would house sit a very old manor home that was near the Mason-Dixon line. This location becomes important later in the story. Built in the mid-1700s. Like a lot of houses that old, it had a root cellar or sub-basement deep under the house that was used for food storage back in the day, and I always just got the weirdest and most foreboding feeling walking past the door leading down to it. I never actually went down there. It was a very big house that had many additions put on over the years, so it had multiple alarm systems. And one night, the alarm system in the original part of the house, where the door to the root cellar was, would not stop going off. I probably got out of bed 7 or 8 times to enter the code to turn it off that night. It was an older alarm system, so I figured, probably old wiring or a part of it going bad or something, and didn't think too much of it other than being annoyed that it kept waking me up. When the family got back from vacation, I told the father about the night the alarm kept going off, and he looked very puzzled. He told me that had never happened before in the several decades they had lived there, and even weirder because it was an older alarm system, and in that part of the house, all of the alarms were motion activated. I later found out the house was right down the street from a Quaker meeting house in an area with a high Quaker population that was well known for its role in the Underground Railroad. Families in that area would routinely let people escaping slavery hide in their root cellars and sub-basements. My family is ancestrally Quaker, and the family who lived there was not. Still, kind of gives me chills thinking about it. Everyone knows the Queen Mary is haunted, but there's a difference between reading about it and actually sleeping in it. I finally saved up enough to book Stateroom B 340, the room they kept locked for 30 years because the activity was just too much, as they put it. Let me tell you, it wasn't just creaky pipes. Around 3 a.m., the faucet in the bathroom turned on full blast. I checked it before bed. It was bone dry. Then, the rhythmic banging started. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside the walls of the cabin. I've never felt a room go that cold, that fast. Has anyone else stayed in this room and had the door handle rattle while they were inside? I swear someone was trying to get in, but when I checked the peephole, there was nothing there but the empty hallway. Some ghost stories are unbelievable. It's when you get to experience it firsthand that those stories are no longer just stories. Years ago, I was in England at an ex-boyfriend's home in a large Victorian mansion in Brandon, Suffolk, gorgeous English countryside. It was his parents' home that had been in his family for about 3 generations, if I remember correctly. He was called into work and I was left in the home with his mother. She came upstairs to let me know that she was going to be running errands and she would be gone for the day, so I was home alone. About an hour passed and I got up to use the bathroom, which was inside the bedroom. Instinctively, I went in and locked the door out of habit, even though I was home alone. The door to the bedroom was closed, and the door to the bathroom was closed and locked. I heard knocking on the bedroom door, and I kept answering for somebody to come in, and no one answered. I heard knocking again, called out again for them to come in, and no answer. I assumed it was his mom who forgot something and returned to the house. A couple minutes later, I heard a woman's voice from the other side of the wall in the bathroom, calling my name, and I kept answering, assuming it was his mom. I heard this woman calling me 3 or 4 more times, to which I answered, but I never got a response. About 45 minutes later, my ex came home and I told him how his mom was knocking on the door and she must not have heard me, but she was calling me and I was answering her, but she didn't hear me. I felt really bad because when I left the bathroom, she had left the house again. He was super confused because he told me his mom had been out all day and she wasn't back home, so I told him that she must have left. She told me she was leaving, but then less than an hour later, I assumed she forgot something because she definitely came back and was knocking on the door and calling me because I could hear her from the bathroom. His mom got back home about 3 or 4 hours later, and around the dinner table, I apologized for not getting to her before she left the house again, and she looked at me like I was absolutely insane. She had no idea what I was talking about. So I explained the story, and she very flippantly said, "Oh, that must have been the ghost of that girl," and everyone laughed. I laughed too, but this house was super creepy, and I kind of believed it because I definitely believe in paranormal stuff. My ex got really serious and looked at me and said, "I'll talk to you about it later." After dinner, we went back upstairs and he said for me to show him where I could hear the woman calling me from, and I said, "Oh, just from the other side of the wall in the bathroom." And he said, "The wall in the bathroom?" I said, "Yeah, the wall in that bathroom." And he said, "Which wall?" So I went into the bathroom and pointed to the wall, and he said, "You realize that that wall is to the outside, right?" We were about 4 stories up. This house was massive, a literal mansion. He said that I became white as a ghost because I didn't even realize that was the case. We were extremely high up, and on the other side of that wall was a courtyard with an in-ground pool far below us. He proceeded to tell me a story about a young woman back in the 1800s or so who lived in the house with her family and entered a relationship with an older man that the family did not approve of, and they forbade her to see him. She rebelled and continued to see him anyway. When the family found out that she was secretly seeing him, they locked her in the room, which happened to be my ex's bedroom. I'm not quite sure how long she was locked in the room for, but there used to be train tracks that ran behind that house that you could still see in that courtyard. Apparently, she threw herself onto the train tracks out of the window, and people have heard her calling their names for years on end since she died. The whole family assumed that she was the one calling me because I was always at that house. Needless to say, I never wanted to sleep in there again. I am convinced our meeting room is haunted. A few days ago, the police came down to our office at night because they had received 50 calls from a number at our location. The number belonged to a phone in a rarely used meeting room next to the office that I worked in. The management rushed back to the office and got the night shift technicians and I, T-guys, to check the phone, but everything was normal. They checked the surveillance cameras and door records and confirmed that there wasn't anyone inside the meeting room when the 50 calls happened. The meeting room is located between my office space and an access corridor to the basement floor. There are no windows at the meeting room, and it is rarely used for meetings. At night, some of the overnight staff use it to nap during breaks. As I recall, I have used this room to take a nap during my night shift hours, and almost always had weird dreams, and I'd also wake up feeling very groggy and tired. I have always brushed it off as me being too tired, as I have always encountered sleep deprivation when I'm on night shift. But on another occasion, last month, one of the staff who rarely used the room decided to use it to work on a report. 30 minutes later, she came out of the room complaining that the room smelled moldy and it made her face itchy. She left work early because the irritation got very bad, and she was then out of work for 10 days due to a very bad mass pimple outbreak. After this incident, however, I am feeling more convinced than ever that the weird dreams and nap issues that I had in the meeting room were not as straightforward as I thought. Maybe there is something in that room? I have asked a few coworkers around me, and all of them said that they either had weird dreams or woke up feeling very exhausted. Another coworker recalled having sleep paralysis in the same room too. The police told us that when the dispatcher answered the calls, they only heard a static noise. The calls did not cut off, and they just remained static. The police rushed down because they were worried that someone was trying to send a distress call or there was a hostage situation.